Okay, so this morning, June the 7th, 2023, Bank of Canada moves rates up by a quarter percent. Um, I would say I debated doing an earlier video because there was some chatter around that. But, here's a few things that I think we know. So rates are up by a quarter percent. So we know that's going to influence your payment by a quarter percent. Same amount of payment increase you would have had in January. So not the worst we saw last year, but definitely not great news with the all intentions, except for the last couple of weeks that rate hikes were done, and I think perhaps at some point going the other direction. What's happened here is that inflation and CPI has reversed direction and gone the other way. So inflation and consumer price index is going higher, and so the economy, from the Canada perspective, is heating up. Let's deal with a few things here. First of all, the way the Bank of Canada is fixing inflation is the same as if you're going to your doctor saying, my leg hurts. The doctor does no tests, looks at you, and just cuts your leg off. I don't care what your brother with an MBA said or what you read in the Globe and Mail. Like, that's the long and the short of it. If interest rates being raised had an impact on inflation, the effects would be seen not immediately, but by now on things. And so we know that although certainly it's had some impact. I mean, the housing market was meaningfully affected by it last year. We know that inflation is not being brought down by interest rates. And so the diagnosis is wrong. And at some point, you can't just keep cutting off legs. But that's what the Bank of Canada appears to be willing to do. So, inflation, is driven by. Let's just give an example of. I think we still have some pressing supply chain issues, but also, if we think about the housing market, okay, how do we bring down demand? Okay, so if we raise interest rates, does that stop people from buying homes? No, because we still have a housing shortage. We still have not enough houses for how many people are needing to get into houses. We have a number of issues with that. First of all, we have a huge landlocked problem. If you look at BC, you have a significant amount of land that can't be developed. This is why you see higher incomes in Alberta, but lower price points, because even though they can afford a higher cost of housing, there is more ways for them to expand and grow. Where in BC or even in Ontario places, there's by a whole lot of government regulation and process. There's very little housing, and so that is the supply issue. Interest rates does not fix that. If you think about the immigration issue, then bringing in 400,000 immigrants, we are increasing the population and not increasing housing. Now, all these election promises you see from government officials, we're going to build more housing, are very, very well thought out because they haven't addressed the issue. How would we get the supply to build homes, materials, and whatnot? How would we get the labor force to build it? So it's a very empty promise, and obviously making quite a massive difference when it comes to the fact that that's not slowing down inflation. So I think we need to really pay attention to that. Secondly, the prediction by economists today was that there was about 20% of them were saying that interest rates should go up. And so we know a very, very key thing from this today that's happened is that obviously Tiff Macklem and the Bank of Canada, because of what happened previously where he became universally panned that he raised interest rates too slow, and that's why he had to have a year of I'll show you where he raised rates so meaningfully. So what we know now is that if I would have said a year ago, hey, we kind of know the direction they're going to go sooner than later, because they're leaking this out to the appropriate people. I think what's really happening right now is I think that Tiff Macklem's approach has been that he's waiting for somebody to call him out. So I think we need to really pay attention to this. Do not, for goodness sakes, pay attention to the Globe and Mail. I'm going to scream if I see one more person that emails me, hey, I saw this in the Globe and Mail. Not a credible source. I don't mean that they have stuff that I disagree with or some of that. They don't even publish right information. It's ridiculous. But here was the key thing. If we look on economists saying this week the Bank of Canada should raise rates. I think we need to pay attention to that. I wouldn't have thought that a year ago, but it appears that the Bank of Canada will react to that, and they'll react to being called out. And that's why I say ego, a big part of it is that Tiff Macklem, is throwing out the rule book, and that they will react to the ego of economists saying, oh, you should raise rates. So previously, I would have thought that was a non-issue. Previously, I would have thought that it was not as much of a factor. But it's clear to me that he's watching what those folks say, and he's more worried reputationally than making a good decision economically. Okay, so this is important. Where does that put us as far as the fixed and variable rates? Fixed rates have moved up a bit in the last little while, but fixed rates are still, generally fixed rates are really where they were when rates started moving up in March of 2020. So I don't feel like you've missed the boat on fixed rates or anything like that. I think that at this point, we need to as much as, I'm Mr. Variable Guy in some senses of the word. I think that it's if your budget is fixed, I would say that if you were to ask me today, do we think rates are going up, or do we think rates are, if they're going to continue to go up? The truth is, for the first time, I'm saying we really don't know anymore, because the playbook that they're using is not something that's predictable in the sense that, if that inflation data goes up, obviously they're intending to move rates up. I still think by moving rates up, I think this is an important thing. I still think there's a case to be made that we don't see a lot of further rate movement, for the reason that I think that it's batted around that a 5-6% interest rate is a reasonable interest rate, and that is historically low. And so we still are at that point, and that's why you see only a 0.25% increase. So I think I think that we're at the top of that, but I don't know. I don't know until so I would believe that there isn't a lot of rate movement, even regardless of what's happening. But I also believe that they're not falling predictable stripped. I also believe that they're not taking in consideration a whole lot of factors, and so I think that's far from guaranteed. I think you could go to. I'm staying variable for two reasons. Is that I believe that fixed rates and variable rates are in some way, somehow controlled by the same parties. So I don't think you cheat the system by going fixed rate. I think you end up in the same boat at some point. Two, I think that the flexibility provided by variable is very meaningful. We're talking about penalties. Now, I've done lots of videos now. We don't need to go into depth on that. Third is that I do know that historically that the variables always outperform the fixed, and I'm very, very not prepared to believe that that's going to change at any point with how much economic activity we've had in the past since 1952. So I think so. But on the flip side of things, I do know that when you're looking at the fixed rate being a point below the variable, look, you can very much. If you're feeling the predictability of it all, I think you could move over to a fixed rate. And I think that, that would be settling for your budget. I think that would take out the guesswork, and I can understand why you would do that. Joel, you're recommending that? I mean, I think that we will have a lot of people with buyer's remorse that do that at some point. I still believe that. But I think that if you're saying, for our family's sake, for budget's sake, for stability's sake, I don't think you're making a terrible decision if you go to a fixed rate at this point. Again, fixed rates are very similar to what they were, a year and a half ago. They've went down, they went up a bit, but they're within that range. So you haven't missed the boat. So if you want to lock in, because you can do that, and just reach out to us. It's a very easy process to do that. Again, I want to reemphasize. People are saying, Joel, you're recommending it. Look, I'm not recommending. The only reason I'm recommending is if your affordability is really starting to get stretched. Yeah, okay. I think from the affordability perspective, I think we can safely say at this point that we could be recommending that, with the caveat that you better not think about selling, or you better not think about doing a lot to your mortgage without the potential of that penalty. And so I think that's really, really, really important to be aware of. Anyway, that's a long-winded video. If you have any questions, you need any mortgage help, please reach out. Have a great day.